friends. Hello, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the podcast where I sit down with other writers and we talk for a little while and then we make up a story on the spot at the end of it. So, same format every time. I have a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy listening to this as well. Please, if you're interested in this podcast, please subscribe to it wherever you get your podcast. Tell your friends about it. And importantly, leave reviews. As with everything, reviews do absolutely matter. Before I get to today's guest, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to plug? I've got this book coming out in November that I'm super excited about, and it is called When They Find Me. And it is actually getting some great early buzz and getting read, early review copies getting read, reviews going up. And I just want to emphasize how important pre-orders are to an author. Why are pre-orders important? Pre-orders are important because all of those orders that take place in the months before publication all get counted towards that first week's sales figure. And that's important because that week's sales figures goes towards hopefully making fun bestseller lists, because you want to have a strong showing, because bestseller lists, you look at weekly sales, and your first couple weeks, those are when most of your sales occur. So I urge you, I implore you, I'm on my knees begging very politely, if you're interested in my books, and you're interested in reading When They Find Me, which comes out in November, please go to my website and you can read about the book, and there's a little button on there to pre-order, and it can take you to any one of your favorite retailers to get that done. So thank you in advance for that. I'm sure I will be hawking my wares about this more as the months go on. All right, today's guest, I had the pleasure of talking to the wonderful Katrina Denza. So Katrina is a writer of short fiction, and her most recent, her debut collection came out in November of 2025. It's called Burner and Other Stories. And I had a fantastic talk with her. This is, you talk to somebody like Katrina, and I'm like, all right, this is a real writer. Not that I talk to unreal writers, but she's a writer. It's in her blood. And she even said this was something that I always wanted to do when I was young. Of course, we take time away to raise families and all those things. But about 20 years ago, she really started getting back into it, and had always gravitated towards short fiction. And she has dabbled in novels, and she's working on a novel right now. But really, short fiction is where her heart's at, and how her writerly brain works, which is short fiction is a huge struggle for me. I'm very jealous of people who can do that. But so it was just really interesting to hear the parallels between writing novels and writing short fiction in our conversation, and kind of the struggles you have all the time with the same things, and the things that are important to both styles of writing, things like community, which we talked about a lot, the ability to take rejection and view it as redirection, and finding those early readers who can really give you the advice you need, and being vulnerable and curious enough to listen to people and not just be stubborn about your writing, and being willing to be flexible and to grow and to learn as a writer. So she was terrific. I really enjoyed our conversation together. And then at the end, we made up a kind of weird little infidelity story, starting with a line from an F. Scott Fitzgerald short story. So you're going to love this one, folks. There's a lot of good writing advice in this episode. This is my conversation with Katrina Denza. But your debut just came out last November, right? Or
It
last,
did. That's
yeah.
right. Yeah,
So Julia reached out, and I was reading about you. So you came out with a debut collection of stories. Is that correct?
correct.
But you've been
Yes.
writing for a long time.
About 20 years. And
Okay, so we're
actually,
similar in terms of that.
yeah, yeah.
So
And
what
actually,
got you into it?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I wrote as a kid, so I've always loved writing. And I just took a very long break from writing
Yeah.
to raise my kids and paint. I
Okay.
just
So you've
hope,
always had that artistic brain.
sure. Yeah.
Where did you grow up?
Vermont.
Oh, that's my last book was set there, and that's a place that my partner and I have always I'm in Colorado, that we've kind of had an eye on, and we're doing a New England road trip this summer, and we haven't figured out where yet, but we're going to spend at least a week out in Vermont somewhere. Where in Vermont were you raised?
Well, I was born in Burlington, and then my
Oh,
family moved to central Vermont, Rutland Town area. So
okay.
then, yeah, yeah. You're gonna love Vermont, particularly in the
I
summer.
was about to say, particularly in the summer. So
Yeah.
we're doing Maine. Her son is going to be going to the University of Maine, so we're kind of dropping him
Mhm.
off, and then just. I write a lot about New England, and I don't have that much familiarity with with New England. I just set a lot of my books there for
That's interesting. I mean, I can see why it sort of has this old Gothic feel to it, you
totally.
know?
Yeah, the first time I did it, I knew it was going to be taking place in the 2 weeks leading up to Halloween, and I wanted a location, and I like places I don't know. I like to write about things I don't know about. It's just interesting, and I just kind of thought New England's kind of creepy,
Yeah.
and and then went out there, visited, skulked around a bit, and there's a lot of good vibes. There's a lot of towns where I try to avoid the tiny, tiny, tiny towns because then everybody knows everything. But you've got a lot of small towns, and then you've got Boston.
Right, right.
There's not a
Yeah.
lot of in between. So I chose Manchester, New Hampshire, because that was kind of big enough where you didn't necessarily know everybody.
Yeah, I sort of rode horses and trained in Concord, New Hampshire, which isn't
Oh yeah,
that
yeah.
far.
No, we've been looking at that too for a Airbnb. Yeah,
Yeah.
and my last book was Burlington. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so research the coffee shops there and all that stuff. But
That's good.
so you
Yeah.
were a creative kid, and it's funny about writing because I always contend that if there's a writer in you, it'll come out kicking and screaming at some point. And I think there has to be this confluence of your desire for writing and then also understanding what it's like to be a writer, knowing the realities of being a writer, and that usually takes a lot of years and obviously raising kids and all the other stuff that we have to do to be like, all right, now I'm ready for this very unpredictable whatever this is going to be. And it sounds like maybe that was the case for you.
Yeah, it's funny. I've always read, so I think that if you're a reader, you're a writer. I say that to a lot of people, and I believe it. If you read as much as, as I do anyway, and a lot of my friends read as much as I do, and I just think it's like a natural part of the conversation, reading and writing. But in that 20 years that I've been writing, it was practice and community, finding my community,
Right.
finding, for instance, I was part of Zoetrope Virtual
Hmm.
Studio,
Yep.
and it was like a free MFA. It
Yeah,
was
that's great.
amazing. Hmm.
But it's a commitment. I'm sure
Yeah,
there's a lot of people who dabble, but you really have to apply yourself and to be dedicated to it.
there's another word for that, stubborn, I suppose. But
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, I've interviewed 250 plus people on this, and there's a few hallmarks of writers, and one of them absolutely is tenacity. Like this,
yes,
people who read a book like I can do better than this, but then, to your point, it's kind of interesting you say if you're a reader, you're a writer, and I think that's generally true. But how many people have we met? You say you're a writer, and they're like, oh, I've got this idea. I've always wanted to do that. There is this bridge to commitment that most people, walk a few feet on and then they turn around, or they commit and then they get a rejection and then they turn, it's really much harder, I think, than most people realize.
that's very true. And I would say, not to discount the very the truth of needing to learn craft.
Right.
So you can want to be a writer all you want, or you can have a story in your head all you want. But if you want to reach more readers than just, a couple of people here and there, it's a commitment to learning the craft in whatever way that means. I don't necessarily believe you need an MFA. I don't
Oh
have an
no, yeah.
MFA.
And it depends on what you're writing too.
Exactly. And I think having an MFA is great. I know a lot of my friends, they say their benefit of having an MFA was to have the time allotted
Right.
to just reading and writing. Um, but I think it's necessary to learn to fail over and over and accept failure as a part of your process.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I preach that all the time and really kind of reimagining failure as what do I learn from this? This is just redirection, you know, and that's a hard thing to learn because if you see a lot of it's out of our control, right? A lot of it is just it's got to hit the right person at the right time and they're going to say yes if you want to be traditionally published. But a lot of it's just like, okay, this book isn't ready yet, or this story isn't ready yet. Let's move
Mhm.
on to the next one because I got lots of ideas. But some people just, and because I coach writing too, and I see it, it's like they won't, you could tell the manuscripts that are decent, but probably not marketable. But
Mhm.
I saw that in myself. I'm like, that just means that was my first 2 years of college, writing that book. Now I got to continue my
Yeah.
education. I'm not ready yet, but I needed this to get to the next step.
It's
And
so
it's hard.
true, Carter. I mean, I had published around 30 short stories
Yeah.
before I wrote these stories in Burner. And I could have collected them. And in fact, I might have collected some and search for an agent with that collection. But I wasn't 100% behind publishing those stories as a collection. They felt a bit disparate, and I felt they didn't speak to the times in the way that the stories
Mm-hmm.
emerged.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think those were my, and not to discount them, but they were sort of my training.
Yeah,
If
totally. It's funny when I talk to people, if I'm speaking somewhere and I tell them about, I got an agent with my first book, same agent I'm with today, 20 plus years later, but my first three books didn't sell. And to non-writers, that's like, how can you just are you going to go back and try to publish those now? And it's like, you don't understand. Like, I'm okay. I let it all go. Like I needed those books to learn how to write. That was my education because I don't have an MFA and I went to business school essentially. So I had to learn how to do this and it just takes hundreds of thousands of words and failures and being vulnerable enough to learn and be curious to keep going. That's how I was able to do it. But you got to let the past go.
Absolutely. And I think my time as a painter really taught me failure. I mean,
Yeah,
I am a failed artist, but I'm okay with that.
yeah,
And I still play around with it. But it really did teach me to be able to separate myself from the product, the end product, if you know what I mean,
yeah,
and be more interested in the process, which
yeah.
I think the process of writing can be a beautiful meditative thing.
I use the word meditation all the time because it's one of the few times of the day, if not the only time of the day, that you are forced to be so fully in the present. And
Mhm.
it's not just about concentration, it's just about being in the present and being like in the story. And whether it's frustrating or whether it's flowing, it's a magical part of the day.
Yeah.
I
Do
love
you
it.
set yourself a word count a day, or how do you?
Yeah, I do. So when I started writing, I had a corporate job. And we were pregnant with our first kid and, that whole thing. So I learned how to write an hour a day, 7 days a week. And now that I write full time, that's still what I do. So I go to a coffee shop every morning, 7 days a week for an hour. And If I'm writing actively, 500 to 700 words, maybe. If I'm editing, it might be 20 pages, whatever it is. But you just chip away, and
That's right.
you
It adds
get it
up.
done. It
My
does.
my low uh, goal for writing a day is 250 words.
Yeah, that's all it takes.
It really
It's about building that muscle and maintaining the muscle,
is.
and the consistency. What I think one of the biggest mistakes I'm seeing aspiring writers do, talented, creative people, is they're waiting for the muse, they're waiting for the right moment, and they might have a 4,000 word through the night session, which is great, but then they don't touch it for another month.
Right.
And that's and then we start talking about the difference between being a writer and being a career writer, because there's a lot of other considerations, and one of the things about being a career writer is consistency. And it's really hard to do, but it is about that muscle.
Sure. Sure. Do you ever take residencies? Have you ever done that?
I haven't yet, but I saw that you did for quite some time, right?
Yes, I've been fortunate to go to a few. One, I used to actually run a writing residency. I was chair of the program. Um, but for me, I still don't write 4,000 words a day, but
I think they would be my words would be terrible after the first thousand.
same, same. But, I am more focused and more productive in a residency than I am at home even.
It's
Um,
such an intentional thing, right?
it
It's like,
is.
yeah,
Yes. But I don't think, I've always said I can't write from a vacuum. I have to have some connection to life and
yeah.
community. So I wouldn't want to sequester myself away for, a long period of time. It would get very dull.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that funny, the irony of that? Because that is kind of the image we all conjure as kind of the dream. And I've taken trips alone just to go write,
Mhm.
and it does get boring. It's like, you're like, all right, because my brain goes to mush after a certain word count, and then I'm like, now what do I do the rest of the day? I can't, I'm not Thoreau here. I'm not going to just immerse myself into nature. That's not how my brain works. I want to watch TV or something.
Yeah.
So when you kind of started this recommitment 20 years ago to writing,
Mhm.
how much of it, because this is what I'm always curious, kind of talking about the career path, how much of it was like, I'll just write whatever comes to me versus being, really looking at like, what's my best chance of getting something published? Or what was the goal when you started?
Yeah. So if you had asked me 20 years ago, would I rather win a Pulitzer or be a best-selling author? I would have told you win a Pulitzer.
Yeah,
You know, now I'll take anything. No,
right.
but no, back then my goal was to publish a story.
Yeah. Which is
And then
terribly hard to do. Short
it,
story, long form, whatever. It's really, really, there's a lot of, especially short fiction.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot of people who are submitting to these magazines, and it's just really difficult.
and I would argue even harder today than it was 20 years ago when
Oh,
I
I
was.
think absolutely for all forms of getting published.
But so my goals were small, Carter, but I knew down the road I wanted to have a book of short fiction. I fell in love with short fiction after I moved to North Carolina from Vermont
Hmm.
and sort of discovered, writers like Richard Bausch and Mary Gateskill, their short stories. And I was like, wow, look at what you can do in, this much space. Um, and so that was my focus for many years, writing short stories and getting them published. But then I started to think about, when I did get my first agent through the collection that I shopped, she wanted a novel. This was back in 2006. And, this is a story that many writers hear of short stories. It's hard to sell short stories. And so I I started to write a novel, but it was coming out as a novel and stories. And the
Oh.
agent was like, no, can you do a linear novel? Well, stubborn me
Mhm.
put that aside and wrote an entirely different linear novel.
Oh.
Will never see the light of day. I mean, not to, again, not to disparage it, but it's not something that's marketable. But I did it to prove I could do it.
And what was that process like? Because you had done these short
Oh,
stories and that must have felt very different.
it was kind of weird. I did it quickly.
Interesting.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's the tenacity in me. Like, oh, yeah,
Yeah,
well,
right.
maybe that project isn't coming out as a novel, but I've got another idea and I
Yeah.
can do it. Um,
Huh.
and yeah, it taught me that I have the capacity to do it, but I think it's really hard to write a novel if you've
Yeah.
been writing short stories for a while.
I think all forms of writing are hard. I mean, I've probably so my 11th book is coming out, but I've written maybe a dozen short stories in my life, like not that many.
Oh.
Um, and I find it so incredibly difficult because I'm immediately like, oh, there's so much more to this, but how do I create an arc in 3,000 words?
Yeah.
And I'm just not good at it. And, that's just not, and I think there's something about we have to balance kind of our dreams and what we want to see on the bookshelf with how our brains work, what we're good at. And boy, I'll tell you, like, that's not my strength, short fiction, because I don't know how people can just, like you said, how you do so much with so few words. And it's really a magical thing.
Well, I used to play with flash fiction and microfiction. I can't do it now. It
Right.
is, talk about magic. I think,
Meaning like 500 and less kind of a thing,
oh,
or even
yeah.
less. Yeah.
Yeah. And people who do it and do it well, like Kim Chinqui and Kathy Fish, they are brilliant at it. And it's like prose poetry,
Yeah. Right.
not quite, it's a little different. Um, But I'm trying my hand at a novel now, and
Oh, right.
it's a blast. It's daunting, Carter. It's daunting. I don't know how you've done
It
11
does,
of
it doesn't get any easy. I mean, the physical act, the muscular act of writing gets easier because you've trained that part of your brain. You can once I kind of know what I'm writing about, at least for a scene, like it's not super hard. But yeah, I'm immediately overwhelmed because I don't outline. So I'm like, I
Yeah.
just see the light in front of me, and I'm like, I have no idea if this is a cohesive anything. Like, I'm literally shipping off my next manuscript to my agent because she likes to see it in paper today.
Wow.
I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, I don't know. It might be good, it might be terrible, and you just lose. It's so big, you lose all context for it because you spend so much time with it.
I understand, or I'm getting to that point where I can understand. I don't outline either.
Yeah,
I might try to envision the next three chapters,
right.
but there are so many decisions to be made.
So yeah, it's a lot. It's about trusting your instinct, but then that's a really hard thing to do. I mean, I think most writers, including myself, in the act of writing, are full of self-doubt all the time. So when you say trust your instinct, you're like, well, what if my instinct's wrong? But that's all I can do, because like you said, what else are you gonna you have 20 paths you can go down. You can't
Yeah.
go down them all. You can go down one.
The thing is with short stories, you
Right.
can. You can
Mhm.
go down a few paths, right? I have rewritten a short story. It might have started out in first person, and then I rewrote the whole thing into third person, changed the tense sometimes, taken out characters. You can totally rip up
Yeah.
and rearrange the plot in a short story. And that's for me part of the fun. It's completely inefficient to do that with a novel. Like,
It is, but I feel like all those short stories also train you to find your voice in a way.
mhm,
Because it was
that's,
my fifth book where I realized what I'm best at is first person present tense. But it
Hmm.
took four, or including the unpublished ones, 7 books to figure that out. And boy, it would have been nicer to have written a lot of short stories where I played around with different things and realized that ahead of time, because that ended up being what I consider to be my voice. And it's a lot of words to get there. And
Hmm.
I've guessed wrong on novels before where I've written that whole novel third past and gone back and changed it. And that sucks. That's
Yeah,
months of work.
it
Um,
is. Yeah,
so
I can
so how
imagine.
far into this book are you?
Um, a, a few notes,
Yeah,
and I would say 4,000 words, so not very far.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I have the first sort of 6 chapters sort of envisioned.
Got it.
Um,
Now, is this something that tenacity came back? You're like, I want to do this again, or is this something that your agent's like, you should give this another shot?
I don't have an agent.
Okay.
So no, that agent gave up on me years ago. Actually, she left the agency.
Yeah.
But no, this is just something I want to do. I actually have 2 novel ideas. And so I'm going with one that feels hotter to me right now.
Right.
And then I actually have another story collection drafted, but not revised. So it's in a stage where I wouldn't show it to anybody,
Right.
really.
Right. Right. And I love what you said earlier when you said you started out, you just had very small goals. But I think that's so important is you had small goals, but you had goals, right? You had
Mhm.
something to work towards. And, sometimes I see people with like these, it's okay to have an unrealistic goal. I think that's fine as long
Mhm.
as you can temper expectations. But
Yeah.
what I'm seeing are people who I think they like the idea of being a writer more than they like writing. And I
Mhm.
think goal setting only works if you have that, which you clearly do, underlying passion for just the art of storytelling
Mhm.
and the ability to say, like, yeah, maybe this gets published, maybe it doesn't, but the next one, but the next one, but the next one. And
Mhm.
all the while you're like storytelling. And I think that's the nuance of the magic in it all. Is that I think the people who see any kind of commercial success, however you want to define that, they would be writing no matter what. Because they just keep doing it and they're learning in the process.
Because I think you really have to love the process. Like like
Yeah.
I have tried and been much more successful in the last 5 years, separating myself from the product
Yeah.
and falling in love with the process. And that's when things clicked for me. That's when I stopped worrying about, if a story was going to get published and instead drafted these stories and worked on them with an idea of a book in mind. Like, so the whole
Totally.
book, the process, instead of I want validation by getting something published. And not to say I didn't send out the stories for publication, but I didn't send them out as quickly as I had other stories in my past. These I took my time with, and if they didn't get published, it wasn't a sort of um, comment on whether or not they were valuable.
Yeah.
They were
Yeah.
valuable to me. And
Totally.
that is the most important thing that I learned about my own process. And it took me 20 years, or, maybe not 15 years it took me.
But those 15 years you had to go through that, right? They like it doesn't have it's none of it's wasted time. And
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think this circles back to your comment about meditation because the way that and I think maybe a lot of pantsers that are us non-outliners approach things is it's all problem solving to me. It's like every day that I drive to this coffee shop and I sit down, it's not like I'm going to work where I'm just like, oh God, another day. I'm just like, what happens? And I don't know what happens. And I got to solve the problem. And it might be tough and it might be frustrating, but it's such a mental exercise. It's like doing, high level Sudoku every day. And it's exciting. And sometimes I hate it, but it's like, it's never something I don't want to do.
Right, right. So I don't go to a coffee shop, but I do walk in the woods a lot. And, problem solving is done in the woods a lot of times for me. And I have my phone with me and I'll just take notes on my phone.
You're taking voice notes and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I'm
You're
not
actually
that,
like writing notes on your phone.
yeah,
Wow.
stopping. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, that's like part of the whole thing. Or as doing dishes, you'll have an aha moment, right? So it's just part of it's integrated into your day, this always trying to solve the problems of your novel or your story or whatever.
Totally. And I don't, it's funny because I tell people, and I think it's mostly true, I don't think about my books so much when I'm not in the act of writing it. But there's something about letting go every day that opens your mind, right? Like you're not trying to grasp onto something so hard that you can't hold on to it. And it'll be like I might be watching a show and then something that they do like occurs to me, oh my God, this solves X problem. And I'll look at it and I'll think, am I just like grasping for solutions? Or was I supposed to be sitting here in this moment watching this because this has some kind of tangential advice to what I'm working on? And I think it's the latter. And if you just let yourself go, that stuff comes to you if you don't try to force it.
Absolutely. It's the magic. You can't beat it into fruition for like I
Oh,
can't. I
no.
can like force myself to solve the problem. But yeah, magically it just shows itself. It's
Right.
really quite fun.
Yeah, it's the subconscious, right? Because it's like, when you're with somebody, you suddenly forget their name, and the harder you try to think of it, you can't. And then later on, you're doing the dishes, and the name just comes to you. That's how it is with writing for me. It's like if you don't try to chase it so hard, it'll come. And I think that weighs in against a lot of natural impatience we writers tend to have. We want it to be done. We want it to be tidy. We want to know that we chose the right path. And if you're not willing to just let go and you know accept that you don't know what's going to happen, if you don't
Right.
have that, then it's a really hard career path.
So you revise a lot or
What I tend to do, I have learned over time as a pantser to again to trust my instincts. So I tend to I'll write a first draft and maybe look back once, like about halfway through. And that's mostly just to literally remember what I wrote because I'm just making it up.
right, right.
And then it's like I get the draft done, and then it's two or three full revisions. But I guess when I revise, it's not like it's rare that I'm chopping 20,000 words and adding 30,000 words. It's it's making sure do I see a theme in here? Is there a theme in here? Is there what I consider to be an arc in here? And how do I tease this out more? And then but then like all of us, I think we have to recognize when we've done the best that we're willing to do and recognize that we're part of a team. So I give it to my agent. She's an editorial agent. She gives me great feedback. Then it goes to my publisher. I mean, I might do months of edits for my publisher. And I'm thankful because I'm like, yes, you're seeing stuff that I can't see. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
so it's having those, like you mentioned early on, community. It's having those trusted partners. And the
Mhm.
hard part is finding those people and finding the ones that you can really trust. But once you do, you can't let them go.
Right. And also, I think our experience, because you've been writing a long time too, you can kind of take critique that makes sense to you and works for you and just sort of discard the rest. That's a
Totally.
nice, um,
That's a skill set, though.
it is a skill set that I learned through doing like a couple of workshops. I went to Suwannee and Bread Loaf a couple of times, and you can tune out because if you don't, you would be trying to
You have a
please.
Frankenstein story.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't work. But so then you kind of fine tune what makes sense to you and your story. And I think that skill carries you through many projects, You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I do have a first reader and a couple of other readers that are very important to me, and I do trust them. Um, yeah, I
When you
don't think I ever send anything out without it having been read by someone else.
and it's a feeling more than anything, right? Like if you're in a critique group, because it's at first it's hard to separate out somebody criticizing it versus somebody giving you something that you believe is a good addition to your manuscript or change to it.
Right.
And that's I think where the skill comes in. But for me, ultimately, it was like when somebody would say something that I just almost felt in my bones,
Mhm.
like when you have that feeling of like, oh my god, I should have thought of that. That's when I know it's good feedback, or at least like-minded feedback, as opposed to a structural change. A lot of people want to tell you how they would have done it,
Well,
and
yes,
that
and
doesn't do
that's
you any good.
no, and so often I'll be specific and I'll say, please tell me if you see a problem, but please don't tell me how to solve the problem
Right, right, totally.
because I have to do it.
Yeah, my book coming out in November. When the first draft I gave to my publisher, my editor, and I had a call, and she's like, "I can't quite put my finger on it, but it just feels a little masculine," which was really interesting considering it was primary point of view from a female,
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
and but there was this kind of organized crime adjacent element to it, and then I just totally saw it. I'm like, I get what you're saying 100%.
Mhm.
I don't think it's a you're talking about a different type of book, but I think I agree with you. So I actually replaced all the characters in the book except for one, that female. But she just that was all she had to say was like, it just feels this. And I had to think about it, and I'm like, but that's the feedback I need, and then we can start kind of brainstorming. But I love that, not like this is you have to change this with this, or
Right.
another one is like I love this one small character. I'd love to see more of them, and you're like, yeah, I think you're right. What could I do with that? Like, how can that character flesh out my primary character by having them on screen more? I love all that stuff because again, it's the puzzle solving.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, I've gotten that last one a couple of times. Um,
So your
yeah.
next thing, so your book is out, and that's exciting and scary and done, and
Oh,
all this.
it's been wonderful. I
That's great.
love the press and yeah, I had a great launch. It was so much fun.
Yeah, it's very it doesn't feel real sometimes, It's just like, wow, that's yeah, I remember my first goal was when I got an agent, I'm like, I just want to have one book published that I can show my kids. That was like kind of it. There's something about the copies, the physicality of it all, which is just so sublime in a way. The smell of opening up a box of books.
Yeah. Well, I used to joke with my friends and my family, I just want to publish a book before I die. And
Right.
and so now my joke is, well, I guess I could die now.
But it was it important to you? I don't want to put words in your mouth because I'm speaking from my own experience. Was it important to you that somebody published those stories as opposed to you self-published them?
Definitely.
Yeah. Why
Most
is that,
definitely.
do you think?
Um, because I had worked for 20 years at my craft and I felt that self-publishing wasn't necessary.
Yeah,
And I feel so strongly about it for me. I think it's good for some people.
100%.
But,
Yeah.
but for me, it was important that I pass through the gatekeeper.
Yeah. I 100% agree. And my roots came from just a deep insecurity of, you know, uh, that whole imposter syndrome, which I still have to some degree. That
A
doesn't
lot
really
of
go away.
people.
I mean, it's a real thing, and especially when you have zero background in writing, and you're like, if I self-publish, I'll always wonder,
Yeah.
was this just truly a vanity project, and I'm not good enough, even though there's plenty of stuff that doesn't get published that's way better than the stuff that is published. So it's, you know,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
a true meritocracy by any means, but it was like you, it was important for me to have that gatekeeper say, okay, you can pass through, and then, kind of work on it from there.
Yeah. And I am, you know, unless like I think it's smart for maybe older people who are near the end of their lives, perhaps to leave family history with their family that way. And I think it's a great vehicle for that. Or, for someone who has written something very niche
Yeah.
and would have no hope of ever getting published and it has a very specific audience, I think self-publishing can be useful. But, look, times are changing.
Yeah.
And, um, it might be, I know more and more people indie published, because they're now called indie published books. And there are more and more uh, every day. And
There are, yeah. And, I think the tough part of that as well, there's more content in general, right? Being produced, whether it's being authentically produced or artificially produced, whatever is being produced, there's a lot of content out there. And that's been the case, since 2006, since you wrote that. Like, it's every year there's more and more and more. And what I think kind of the double-edged sword of that is it's forcing more people to self-publish simply because agents and editors are flooded, and it's
Mhm.
harder and harder and harder to get traditionally published simply because there's so much noise. And so
Yeah.
I kind of get it too, right? If like you're like, I want to see this out there, and there are people who, especially in certain genres, sci-fi fantasy is a big one. They know
Mhm.
there's a market there who's going to buy good quality stuff, regardless of who it's being put out by. So I get it. And there's also people who self-publish and then they get picked up. But it's really
Yeah. There are those great stories. I worry, but I worry about this in indie publishing, but the same can be said for traditional publishing, that publishing is becoming um, it's for that we'll only have elite voices or people who can afford to self-publish or promote their own work. You know what I mean? So I don't, I'm and then AI is a whole
yeah,
other
right,
issue.
right.
But I have faith in readers in that they will discern they'll discern good from bad. They can figure it out. And although Carter, I recently took one of those little tests. I think it was New York Times. Can you tell the difference between AI writing and real writing? And I think I got it wrong like 3 times.
Yeah, yeah,
Scary.
yeah.
Oh.
But I think it's funny. One of the things I've been teaching a lot, and I have a class coming up, and it's about how to be visible as a writer
Mhm.
beyond kind of the page, because I think that's part of it. Because I think what you ultimately want to strive for as an author is to have a voice that people follow. Whether it's considered great writing or not, it will be indistinguishable. It will be distinguishable from AI because it'll feel like your voice. But I think on top of that, I think you need to be visible by doing exactly what you're doing now on camera. People can hear you like, oh, I listened to Katrina. I heard her voice. She's really cool. I want to go pick up her short stories now. I mean, I think in the world of AI, that's becoming more and more important. How do people know you, and not just your stories? And that's a scary thing for a lot of writers, because a lot of writers want to be in the woods and not talk to anyone. So it's a balance.
And community, that's where community comes in,
Oh,
right? So being
yeah,
a good literary citizen and yeah, like what you do to help writers. And I think that works among us. And then how do you take that into the public? How do
yeah,
you, yeah,
totally.
it's
No, I'm at Thriller Fest all next week in New York, and I work with the debut authors, and that's just it. Get on panels. Try to moderate a panel. It be an in conversation partner with somebody for their book launch and be a good one.
Yes.
And you'll start to, your voice will get out there and it does really start to snowball. I mean, it takes years, but people will start to know you as somebody who this is your world and they don't just know you by a book cover. And that, that takes commitment, but it's also fun. I mean, that community aspect of it, making friends for life, and it's a huge part of it.
Thriller Fest. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's the global annual thriller conference. So it's about 2,000 people. It's in New York City every year, and it's fun. Yeah, I do a lot of volunteering for different parts of it, and it's yeah. But I started going well before I was published, and it's not cheap, of course, but the people I can call now and cry on their shoulder or invite on a podcast, it's tremendous, and you realize it's a relatively small world in terms of the writing community overall, and you get to know people, and that becomes more important, I think, than a lot of people give it credit for.
I agree. I agree. Some of my very best friends have been made through conferences and, lifelong friends through Zoetrope, some
Yeah,
of whom I've never met in person to this day, and
right,
yet
right,
the
right.
friend.
I
Yeah.
know, that's amazing. Well, Katrina, we're going to wrap up. Before we do, we're going to get to the storytelling part of our show.
Boy.
This will be very short. I've picked three books, not only at random, but like literally sitting next to each other on my bookshelf. I have hardly any organization to my books here. We're going to choose one book. We're going to choose one sentence from a random page, and I'm going to read that sentence. And then that'll
Mhm.
be the first sentence in like a 2 minute long short story. I'll read a sentence. You give me the next sentence or whatever comes to your mind. I do a sentence, and then it'll get bad really quick, and then I'll call it.
Good.
So I've got I don't even remember this book. Out of the Ashes by Maisie Moscow. Um, short stories, the short stories of F. Scott Fitzgerald, and the novel Improbable by Adam Fowler. So choose one of those.
Fitzgerald.
How did I know?
How did you know?
How did I? It's funny. I revisited Gatsby for the first time since high school, and I remember like I was never in any kind of reading in high school, and I revisited it probably 5 years ago. And whatever it is, it's 165 pages. I mean, it's short fiction, really.
Yeah.
It blew me away. Like
Mhm.
I knew I was going to enjoy it, but I was like, this is a profound story,
Magnet.
and it's so well told. All right, give me a page number between 1 and 472.
83.
Okay, so I'm going to quickly look at page 83. This is the first page of the short story titled Mayday. Um, so I'm just going to quickly find a sentence that might work. This is fairly formal writing, but we can do what all right, this is a piece of dialogue, somebody screaming, you do whatever you want with this. May heaven help me, for I know not what I shall do.
I feel like I want to kill him. He's driving me crazy.
We had only sat for the first 20 minutes of the performance, and I was about to claw my way through the armrests of the old theater. I never liked these kind of shows, and she always dragged me to them. But the actor on the stage, there was something getting under my skin that made me want to just charge him.
It was that tick he had, that way of always like clearing his throat. I just I don't know how much longer I could take it.
I looked over at Laura, my wife of 13 years, and she knew I was going to complain. But when I looked at her, I saw how she stared at him, how her eyes moved up and down his body as he pranced around on the stage. She was the one who told me we had to see him in this performance because they had been friends since high school. And now I was getting to think there was something I didn't know about her.
It took me a minute, but Yeah, I was starting to maybe connect the dots. There was something, there was a way that she was looking at him a little too closely. I wanted to just jab her with my elbow, get her attention away from him somehow. But, I'm not going to do that to my wife. I love her.
I turned my attention back to the performance, but I didn't see anything. All I could do was compute the math in my head. Math that told me that this production had only been in town 2 weeks and it would only be here 1 week more. But the math also computed the hours she had been missing during those 2 weeks, hours that she said she was late for work, hours that seemed lost in a way that I wasn't used to from her.
I started to feel like I needed to get some air. It was all making sense now.
I think we call it there. Infidelity and the stage. I love it. That went in a weird direction, but I love it.
Poor Fitzgerald. Oh my gosh.
I know we kind of bastardized it, but that's okay.
Oh
I think
well.
I think we did just fine. Katrina, lovely to meet you, and congratulations on the release of your collection. And I can't
Thank you.
wait to hear when this novel comes out. Good luck with
Thank you
it.
so much. Good luck to you, Carter.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye. So that's it. That is my conversation with Katrina Denza. I told you it was a good little short story. I thought that was nice. I thought that was going into a nice, dark, insecure place, which is an always a good kind of a story to tell. Just a reminder, Katrina's collection of short fiction is out. It is called Burner and Other Stories, and you can find it and everything you want to know about Katrina at her website, which is katrinadenza.com. And you can pop on over to carterwilson.com and check out my new book, When They Find Me. That'll be coming out in November of 2026. And if you want to know anything about the types of classes that I teach or the coaching that I do or our upcoming Paris retreat in spring 2027, head on over to unboundwriter.com, unboundwriter.com. All right, friends, that is it. We are wrapping up this episode of Making It Up. It was a good one. Another one out just next week. In the meantime, take care.